Welcome to the Smart Aerialist podcast. I'm Ophelie, your host, an aerial coach, movement specialist, and lifelong performer. This podcast is for aerialists who want to train smarter, move better, and build strength and flexibility in a sustainable way. We'll dive into the science of aerial training, injury prevention, and long-term progress so you can keep growing without burnout. Whether you're just starting out or refining your craft, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. So welcome to this new episode of The Empowered Badass, the podcast for aerialist, expert or beginner to help you become stronger, more flexible and better at your craft. If you don't know me, my name is I have over 30 years of experience in the circus industry, but I also have over 10 years of experience as a coach. So I like to discuss in this podcast is general ways to help you how to make your life better as an aerialist, not only just on the apparatus, but also to make your training a bit more sustainable. And today we are going to talk about a subject that is a little bit different. It is talking about different body types and how you can find certain challenges for your body type. When I speak about body type, I don't talk necessarily about types that are petite or tall, although that also sometimes cause a bit of challenges, but that we all have a different morphology. And this has always been in your course as a personal trainer, you would always approach any kind of training for people's body types. I'm going to try and define each body type for you, and then I will explain what kind of challenges you can come across in your aerial practice and what you can do to help, I won't say sort of change how you train, but it will also make you find a bit more acceptance sometimes when there's certain things that are a bit more challenging and when you see other people succeed quite quickly. For example, I am a short person and my morphology doesn't allow me to do certain moves, and my morphology sometimes means that my flexibility is a bit more difficult to achieve than another person. Let me explain. The first fact is that we have generalized body types into three categories, so mesomorphs and endomorphs. These classifications, they provide a general framework. Yes, remember that it is general, and they make you understand how body structure can affect your strength, flexibility, endurance, and overall performance in aerial art. Let's dive in. The first one is your ectomorphs first. The characteristic of an ectomorph will be your lean, long-limbed, lower muscle mass, and generally fast metabolism. Those people will tend to have a bit more on the skinny kind of side. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but generally those people will be taller and a bit lanky and have longer limbs. So longer arms, longer legs. The strength of these people, which I'm sure you have come across already, is that ectomorphs will excel in flexibility, and because they have long limbs and they tend to have a good endurance for aerial conditioning. The challenges they may come across is that they may struggle with building muscle mass. I tend to have quite a few people that do struggle with building muscle mass and strength quickly enough to achieve certain pose that require certain strength-based aerial kind of strength. So some versions, dead hangs, can be found a bit more difficult. The thing with also ectomorphs is because they have longer limbs, their center of gravity is further away than the tip of the limbs. So I'm a short person and I don't have long limbs. That means that my core is going to be quite close. Yes. So even if you consider as in the core center to be where your belly button is, right? So that's your core. The core from my belly button to the tip of my arm is going to be much shorter than an ectomorph person. And when we discuss this in training, we talk about levers, and that's just a physics term, right? Your lever, if you have been to school and if you have followed in physics, and bear in mind, I'm not very good at physics at all, but when you work on physics, right, when you talk about levers, for example, you have a seesaw kind of lever. The seesaw has a lever with a point at the center. Obviously, if you lengthen the lever on one side, you're going to need a bit more, the force is going to be different. When the weight is pulled at the end of the lever, so for AKA at the end of your limb, it's going to be much harder to complete the move. For instance, if you were to do a plank with the arms underneath your shoulders, that's one type of lever. Once I'm starting to ask you to hold plank with the arms in front of you, much further away from your shoulders, you're going to start to struggle. If you also do, for example, a hollow body hold, when you do a hollow body hold with the legs closer to you and the arms in front of you, so more like a dish pose, you will find it much easier than the moment you need to start extending your legs further away from your body and your arms up above the head. So we talk about. And with ectomorphs, their levers are much longer. Because their levers are much longer, it's not that they're not strong enough, it's that they do require a substantial amount of force and strength to complete certain moves that require strength and core. So with my training tips for ectomorphs type body structure is, first you want to focus on progressive strength training, you want to build your muscle mass, you want to make sure that you really work on prioritizing your core stability, because that is going to be your center of strength. So obviously hollow body holds, hanging leg raises, and make sure that you balance your flexibility with your strengths as well. So progressive strength training, you want to build muscle mass, doing lots of pull-up and doing lots of weight training on the side. Ectomorphs might need more weight training on the side than any other body structure. Also, recovery is key because ectomorphs tend to have lower body fats, which means that they tend to bruise a little bit faster. You get more common muscle soreness, and it's quite important to incorporate adequate rest and recovery protocol, especially myofascial release, active recovery. Don't forget to get your arnica balm, your bruises, and just, yes, understand that sometimes it can be a bit more challenging for you to recover because also of the lower body fat, you have less cushioning and it's easier to bruise for you. Now, the second body type that we talk about is mesomorph. So the mesomorph are kind of naturally athletics. They're muscular, they tend to gain strength easily, and they have a strong defined frame with a balance of strength and endurance. Mesomorph have good training strengths with excelling at strength-based movement and inversion, and they have a higher muscle mass and they can build strength quickly. I would say that male presenting aerial people tend to be quite a bit on the meso or ecto. I would say because of that. So you would have your very long and tall aerial male presenting body, but also a meso. So the mesomorph are the one, not miso soup, right? But the mesomorph are the one that do work out at the gym quite a lot, and they do tend to body and they build strength quite easily. So that means that they will find all the strength poses, they will move quite quickly in the strength poses, and they will also find all the strength moves such as straight arm straddles and inversion a lot easier than an ectomorph would, all right? However, the challenges can be sometimes presenting into the flexibility, because obviously they build the muscle quite fast. They may need to work harder to increase their range of motion in certain aerial poses. So the training tips for mesomorphs, you can do flexibility training. Make sure that, especially when you do gym workouts, do spend a substantial amount of time stretching afterwards. You can obviously combine active, dynamic, and static stretches. Working on active flexibility drill, make sure that you work on matching your mobility with your strength. You want to include exercises that have mobility in key areas such as obviously the hips, the shoulder, and the spine to improve your range of motion in complex aerial tricks. Mesomorph can handle higher intensity strength training, which means that incorporating moves like pull-ups, deadlifts, and weighted conditioning exercises, we mean weighted conditioning, not just body weight, will help maintain your strength, but at the same time working on your flexibility. Right, those are the mesomorph, which I feel like I lean towards. That's more my body type. I've got quite meso in terms of athletic. You can do tests to define what kind of body type you have. Bear in mind, again, I'm saying this all with a grain of salt because unfortunately, let's take a tiny break to discuss how I do want to still promote body positivity, and this should not make you feel insecure at all. Yes, we're talking about body structure and how you can harness the opportunities and challenges that present with your body structure. It doesn't come from a place of judgment, and if you do some tests to define your body structure, please do it from a place of non-judgment, and please do it from a place of working more from a performance side of things. It's very important for me that you understand that we're talking about body structure, not in a way that make you feel less than, but just understanding what you can work on and where you can harness your strength. So in fact, there are a website where you can actually have a look to define a bit more your body type. I know that from doing those tests when I was doing a personal training course, I am a mix of mesomorph, the one that we just approached, mixed with a bit of endomorphs. So endomorphs, the characteristic of an endomorph would be having a higher body fat percentage, broader frames, and can build muscle easily but may struggle with endurance. So I am a blend of meso and endo. I can put on weight quite easily, I can put on muscle quite easily. I do struggle with endurance. I can find a lot of strength, but I do sometimes can feel like my body fat can change and can fluctuate quite a bit. Now with endomorph, you're training strength, you can gain muscle mass quite efficiently, but you do need a training program to do that. Obviously, it's beneficial for strength-based movement like inversion and holds. Your natural strength will make you powerful aerialist when you're well conditioned. You do have to maintain this conditioning. So at the kind of opposition to mesomorph, the mesomorph tend to quickly snap back when they take a holiday, for example. Endomorph might be struggling to come back a little bit more. That's why I'm tilting quite more in endomorph. The reason I'm mesomorph is because I'm a coach and my entire life is based on staying quite active, right? Now your challenges will be with endurance and flexibility, particularly in movements that will require sustained holds or deep flexibility. So sustained hold meaning as well that you need to hold the pose for a substantial amount of time, not just holding it, but getting into it might take a little while and you might start feeling fatigue quite quickly. So my training tips, there are different training tips than for meso or ecto, right? With the ecto, we want them to build muscle and strength. With the meso, we want them to particularly focus on the flexibility aspect and obviously maintain their muscle strength. With the endomorph, body structure is working on your endurance, making sure that you keep working your conditioning. And that's why it's also important to keep conditioning outside the classes. Actually, it is good for everyone to do that. But it is more important for endomorphs in order to keep consistency in your endurance. Generally, I would say you have already a gym program, try and add a sort of increment of 5 to 10 minutes conditioning workout to your gym workout. This tends to be something that I can do sometimes after my training, and I'll do it in the form of an AMRAP, as many rounds as possible. So I put a timer for 5 minutes, I give myself 3 conditioning exercises, a certain amount of reps. I'm going to do a 20-second hollow hold, 20 mountain climbers, and I'm going to do 10 pike press. Keep it simple, and then you time it for 5 minutes, and then you do as many rounds as possible. You can take the break whenever you want, but try and do as many rounds as possible. So then you can do 10 minutes and 15 minutes, right? But try and keep it going during outside your aerial classes. This will really help you with your endurance. It's just working your endurance outside the classes. Those are kind of important. And if you do like cardio, then incorporate cardio. I'm not talking about pulling everything and just hammering your schedule with extra. Just think either do an extra conditioning workout per week, or maybe an extra conditioning workout and a bit of cardio for like 15 minutes, or you just do 2 conditioning workouts. It's up to you and your lifestyle, how much you can add to your already busy routine, which I believe most of us are. But it's also finding what works for you, what you enjoy doing. I know I absolutely despise doing cardio, but I know it's good for me. So sometimes I try and do a 10-15 minute after my workout. And if I feel like I don't have the time, then I do the finisher in an AMRAP. It's up to you to modulate and find adaptations to what works for you. The other training tip is obviously work on flexibility and mobility, because the same as the mesomorph, you might be sometimes struggling. Also, I do find that meso and endomorphs, mesomorph tend to be on the shorter side as well, and endomorph as well, so we can be short and stocky. Again, not in a negative way, it is just in a way that sometimes we might be struggling with achieving certain flexibility that longer limb people can find a bit more ease in. So there are ways, like I explained, you want to balance your strength and your cardio-based exercises to optimize your performance. If you want to do high intensity interval training, I hate that, I don't do that, but you can do that. And obviously if you do want to work on your body composition to try and have and reduce body fat percentage, then that's your call. I personally, in all honesty, I have put on a bit of body fat since COVID, and I've put on some weight. So I do fluctuate. Let me tell you that I do fluctuate I've fluctuated between 2 and 6 kilos at a time. Now I'm more on fluctuation about 2 kilos. So I can be heavier by 2 kilos or lighter by 2 kilos, which is quite a lot when you do aerial. My body fat has increased a little bit. I've had some health considerations that's happened. I have some stress and situations that have created accumulation of body fat and visceral fat for that fact. Stuff that I need to work on myself, right? But I've noticed things. I've noticed how harder it is for me when I'm heavier. Now, I try to see the silver lining in that is that when I train my strengths at a heavier point, if I ever lose the weight again, I feel much lighter. I try to obviously not obsess about what lower body fat looks like on me, but more into what it feels when I train in the apparatus. And I don't beat myself up for either place I am. Again, like I said, I'm approaching this from a body positive attitude, and I try to approach this as well from a health point and a performance point, rather than make me feel bad about being in a certain place. I'm trying to learn to accept where my body is going, and the important part is that I feel and stay healthy. So whether you choose to change your body composition has to be your own choice, and hopefully, just like me sometimes, hopefully will be a choice as well, that you will feel it actually makes a positive difference in your performance in your aerial classes. Now let's discuss a little bit the joint consideration in aerial training. So body types also affects how your joint move and handle the stress during aerial practice. So first of all, you want to understand that there are biomechanical differences between those body types as well, and how you can help tailor your training to protect your joints and your flexibility. Let's discuss the joints consideration in aerial training. Body type also affects how your joint moves and handles stress during aerial practice. Obviously, understanding that each of these body structures understanding that this body structure also have biomechanical differences, it can help you tailor your training to protect your joint and optimize your performance. Now, let's discuss into the hip flexibility and strengths. The key moves that are affected when you use your hip flexibility is your straddle invert, splits, hip hang. You would obviously also have things like even the gazelle during some backup from your Amazon, things of that sort. Anything that just require your hip to be strong. The biomechanical differences between people with tighter hips, which is common in mesomorph and endomorphs. People may struggle sometimes to keep their hip quite deeply flexed. This knee really squeezed into your chest, in abduction as well, so the external kind of pushing externally, and that can sometimes affect your ability to perform some splits, some leg lifts with the same ease as some ectomorph. So to try and to adapt, you can obviously focus on some hip strengthening and opening stretches. You can work on your lunges, your pigeon, and make hip circles, and you can obviously incorporate hip strengthening exercise like the classic leg raises, your side step, your hip thrust to improve stability and mobility. I do suggest that you use machines at the gym if you have access to gym. I've done many other episodes where I do praise using gym programs and workouts to increase not just the strength but also your flexibility and your mobility. So do go back and listen to them or watch them and make sure that you understand why I'm explaining this. Also, when you really struggle, there will be also adaptations. It is important to build the strength of your hip as much as the flexibility, because your hip flexor is very responsive to fight or flight. And because of our sedentary lifestyle, the fact that we sit down a lot more, we do tend to tighten it quite a bit. And that means that it does need to be strengthened to be okay with being stretched. So understand those concepts. Your shoulder stability and mobility, you would obviously have shoulder mount inversion, hanging holds. Will be, in terms of biomechanical differences, you will have very often, not exceptional to, ectomorph will tend to be a bit more on the hypermobile side, especially the shoulders. And you will notice that your shoulders tend to be a little bit more flexible if you have longer limbs, but sometimes a little bit too flexible in terms of rotation. You will start sometimes being able to pull your shoulders and stretch your shoulders in ways that meso and endo won't be able to. And sometimes it is important to create the difference in between, are you flexible and mobile, or are you just hypermobile? So again, I'm not giving an assessment to the person that's just listening to that. However, it's important to obviously be aware. If you are hypermobile, you can ask people around you, you can ask your coach, and you can obviously judge and be careful. But in general, hypermobile or not, you always need to be careful into not getting injured in the shoulders, because shoulder injuries in the area for a while. So your meso and endo will tend to be a bit tighter on the shoulders. I do find that I am definitely tighter on my shoulders, but also bear in mind that's just a theory of mine. Shorter people, because we have a lot of strength, especially in our lats kind of work quite well, but however they can work too well, and your shoulder flexibility depends a lot on how much your lats can stretch and want to stretch. That might be something that you want to look at. For hypermobile people, you definitely want to work on your shoulder stability exercises. You can do the band exercises, some of those rehab exercises. Don't forget as well that I do have a YouTube channel with all sorts of tutorials, not just for hypermobile people, but for aerialists. That includes conditioning, strengthening, and rehab exercises and flexibility. So do go and check it out at Fit French Kiss and find all those videos. Obviously, working for hypermobility do require a lot of adaptations in terms of you should have support in making sure that you work on strength and stability. And for those with tight shoulders, obviously work on your mobility and your flexibility drills. You want to do a lot of shoulder dislocates with your band. You want to do a lot of lat stretches and sort of other stretches that feel a bit more opening for your shoulders. When we look at the core stability in strength, for your inversion, your drops, your hold, anything, yes, it's quite important for everything. Aerialists with weaker core muscles, again, we can say ectomorphs have a bit less core strength, but to me, and that doesn't necessarily mean less core strength. It's also a matter of having longer limbs, which makes your lever longer, and it's harder to harness that core. You might be struggling again with those inversion and hold, and with those people that have stronger core, it might be easier. And when we're shorter, it might be easier as well. Yes, I'm shorter, so sometimes it's a lot easier to do certain poses. So obviously, with your adaptation, make sure you work on your hollow body holds and learn to lengthen the levers with the same amount of engagement. A lot of people sometimes want to push into the long hollow holds without having the right engagement yet. Really focus on that. You also want to make sure you work on end range conditioning, tension, increasing the control of each movement. When you do an invert, when you do straddle up, try and control your way down, control everything on the way down. Try obviously work in preventing your injuries in inversions or drops. So core strength, really work on that. There is another episode where I discuss how core strength actually prevents your injuries, fall, and bad drops, for example. All right, there are also other things that I play with your body structure, not just into how your body is shaped, but also how you have been training your muscles and how your muscles are responding. We have a different type of muscle fibers also in the body. And so we have the red muscle fibers, and we also have mid, so red and white, and a mid. So the red muscle fibers are the one which are generally more located to ectomorphs, which have more endurance. So the red muscle fibers, that means that the blood flows a lot more. And therefore, that's why they are better in endurance, because they oxygenate their muscles a lot more efficiently. You do have the white muscle fibers, which are burst of strength, and that's why a lot of people do build a lot of strength and then they get a big burst. We do need this like movement. And then we have a mix, so the muscle fibers that have a bit of both help you with a little bit of both. And I think the aerialists would mostly also have this mid endurance. Are a lot for the red. You would find a lot of like people who do long endurance, they have more red fibers. For someone like me, for example, this is why endurance will be hard, because I've trained in gymnastics since a very young age, and my muscles have developed to be more into the second and the third. So, you know, and I've done a lot of weightlifting and weight training, and therefore for me endurance is hell, because I do not have the muscle fibers that do get my muscles oxygenated. Especially if you have big thick thighs, I do find it really hard to get that oxygen in. That doesn't mean it's impossible. Again, that doesn't mean that you can't train and that you can't teach your body to adapt a little bit better, but be aware that, you know, it will differ from each individual, and it's important to understand where you are and what you want to work on, right? Adapting to your individual training needs is quite important regardless of your body type. You need to understand what are your strengths. You need to work on what you find the most challenging, and I hope that you kind of make you a bit more aware of the intricacy of each individual, a body type, a muscle types, and the way we build. So someone who's been training a certain type of sports when they were maybe a child, or when they grew up, or even as a young adult, it will impact how they train in aerial later in life. So it's important to understand this, and why it's easier for a dancer to do aerial and maybe much harder for someone who's done Olympic lifting to come and do aerial. I've noticed, for example, people can come to aerial with a lot of strength, but they don't understand how to bring flow, grace, and control in their movement. Becoming more aware of all these individual needs and intricacies that make up your body as an aerialist are very important to understand. And I'm really hoping that this kind of podcast empowers you more and more to really get to know yourself a little bit better and work with it and accept and love yourself more. So how do you assess this then? You can get a movement assessment, you can assess a little bit about your body structure, but it's not hard to feel how your body responds to certain things, right? If you always hated cardio and if you find you have very low endurance, then you're a bit more on the endomorph side. And it's important to understand that each type of training you've done in your life will impact how you feel and how it will make your training in aerial. Getting a movement assessment can be done with a coach. You can assess your mobility, your strength, your flexibility. You can assess your body type as well, and it will help identify which areas that need the most attention. A coach is the best option for you. Really dive on this. A coach should know and should be able to really support you on that journey. Adjusting your goals as well, not just realistic goals, but also understanding the goals that are based on your body type, your biomechanical strength, biomechanical needs, your individual needs. It's important to focus on your incremental progress and make sure that you hit some milestones towards the goal rather than think about the goal itself. And you might take a very long to achieve, like seconds on a hold is already an achievement. It's important to do that, especially in areas where you feel a bit more, especially in flexibility or strength. For me, my flexibility is taking ages. My strengths tend to progress a little bit faster. So you kind as well in your approach. And finally, training plan, always work both strengths, flexibility, core strengths, and your endurance. I know I say that, I'm not going to be lying. I am not working my endurance that much. But luckily, because I have very hardcore warm-ups, so that really kind of with the amount of endurance that I feel like I need. I also do cycle in the summer and autumn a little bit more around London, and I consider that my own cardio. A lot of people don't, but because I'm very crap at cardio, that's my cardio. It's nice to try and really approach it from a plan that address not just your challenges, but also keep you well-rounded. I hope that this really helped you understand a body type, how that influences your own training, and how you can help yourself adapt your practice to meet your unique needs. Don't forget that you are all unique, and we can be naturally flexible, you can be naturally strong, you can be somewhere in between. It's important to create a plan that will emphasize and balance to improve your performance. Make sure that you get the right guidance and not just use my advice. Yes, obviously this is just to give you my knowledge and my expertise to try and make you a bit more empowered and aware, but use the coaches around you, and don't forget that there is also my platform. You can always to me, and in the show notes you'll find all the details to do that. You'll find me on social media platform, and don't forget, again, like I said, there is my YouTube channel and my own platform, the Aerial Performance Lab, where I create specifically designed rehab, flexibility and strength program for aerialists to make sure that you keep on training sustainably. I really hope that this has helped you. Notes will also guide you to the actual article that I wrote about it with more references if you really want to look at this. And I really hope you share this far and wide to those people that are around you, your bestie, aerial bestie, learning about that a little bit more. And I really hope to see you soon in the next episode. Bye. I also want to remind you that there is a treasure trove of free content that you can access and I create for you. First of all, with every episode, you will see there are show notes where you can access the blog that relate to this episode. The blog dives a little bit deeper into details and also provide added references for you, some extra reading and some science papers that have inspired those episodes and those blogs. Second of all, you can also check out my YouTube channel where you will find a lot of workouts and flexibility, conditioning and strength exercises that are suited for aerialists in particular, but just not aerialists as well. And finally, don't forget to check out my app and the Aerialist Performance Lab.